Hello and welcome to Five Writers, 5 Minutes, where five kids writers talk all things writing. I'm Sarah Armstrong.
I'm Zanny Louise.
I am not Tristan Banks. I'm Mick Elliott.
I'm Leanne Tanner. I'm not Tristan Banks either.
Neither am I. I'm Deborah Abella.
Welcome, Mick. So nice to have you here. Mick Elliott, the author and illustrator of picture books, including Dads and Dogs and Mums and Mogs, and middle grade series, Squidge Dibbly and the Turners. We are going to talk today about making big changes in your manuscript when you are rewriting, in your manuscript, in your story. We're doing that because it's something I'm doing at the moment. I'm making really big changes to my current middle grade book. And I think it's really worth talking about because when we talk about rewriting or editing, or when many people talk about it, and particularly, early writers or young writers, they tend to think it's just sort of, making it sound better, making it, more smooth, but not looking at any of the really big stuff like characters and plot and structure, like not changing where the story begins or changing how it ends or getting rid of characters or bringing new characters in or changing what the character wants, that sort of stuff. And I just think that everything has got to be up for grabs when you're rewriting. It's just too easy to slip into this feeling of, oh, that's how it is, and I'm just tinkering around the edges. It's very easy, even for experienced writers, to slip into that. And I think it's partly because, it's a lot of work to do the big changes, but it can make a story so much better. So at the minute, I'm getting rid of a character. I'm killing a character, not my main character, a sort of secondary character, but an important one. And my publisher and editor sort of said to me, do you think you need her? Would it be stronger if we got rid of her? And I do this thing when I'm thinking about characters, think about what's their function in the story? What's the role they play? And so if I'm getting rid of a character, that's a really helpful way to think about them. Like, can I farm out some of what they do to other characters? And in this instance, I can. When you get feedback, if it just resonates with you, then you know it's right. Sometimes feedback immediately resonates. In this instance, I got this kind of tingling feeling in my body when I read this suggestion. I thought, oh yeah, I think that means I've got to do it. So I'm just encouraging people to think about the big changes when you're rewriting and not get sort of too attached to that first draft. And of course, it can be a bit daunting because if everything's up for grabs, then anything's possible. And what's the point of even writing a first draft? But I think it's that tuning into, does it work? And also maybe making some little notes. Like when I first had this idea, I thought, okay, what does it mean? What can I do with all the information she shares with the story? Her role, her role and function, her dialogue, who can I farm that out to? And I figured that out and I'm like, yeah, I can do it. And now that I'm writing it, it's like, this is so much stronger. So yeah, what about you, Zanny?
Well, I like to think of it, what you're talking about, as breaking open the story. So yeah, this kind of like anything is possible. This is the material I've got to work with in my first draft. Now, what am I going to do with it? What am I going to remake? And sometimes it does have a good form and you want to retain the integrity of it and you are just going to do some tweaks. But like you're saying, sometimes there is a really big shift necessary. So I've been known to shift genres, shift formats, kill off characters, ditch 40,000 words, like so many different things along the way. There's this lovely little video that one of the illustrators of my book, David McIntosh, he's a very well-known English illustrator and designer, and he does this cute little video of one of his books where he does a dress rehearsal for one of his books set in London, and you watch him kind of sketching out the whole book, and then right at the end he scrunches it up, and as a viewer you're like, but I actually really get that. And he calls it a dress rehearsal for the name of the book. And I really like that idea because I think it's, especially in the early days, that's really was my process too. It was kind of like that first draft was almost like a dress rehearsal. And now when we come back to the second draft, we come in, with fresh eyes and fresh view of how we're going to do it. So with my most recent middle grade that I wrote, I finished it off last November and I sent it to my agent and I went, oh, great, that will be wonderful. I look forward to their marvelous feedback. And 8 months later, I got some feedback, which basically means I will have to entirely revision this concept and this story. And I'm actually okay with that. Like, I'm actually really excited. And like you said, Sarah, I've got the tingles about the possibilities of what this story could be. So, exciting new chapter.
I imagine that's the first time that's happened to any author in the history
Yes.
of the publishing industry ever.
Ever.
I had a not quite similar experience, but on the third book in the Turners series, which was called the Turners Fully Doomed. Still to this day, the longest book I've ever written, and I'd submitted it to my wonderful publisher over at Hachette. Hello, Suzanne O'Sullivan, if you're listening, and she gave me a fantastic note on it, which is that I had carried over a secondary character from the previous books who was an adult and played a pretty major part in the story. And she said, "Hey, Mick, this would work better if you actually used one of the teen characters, one of the kid characters in that role." And I had that initial response of going, "Oh, the work involved to do that is a massive structural rewrite." But once the dust settled, I was like, she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right that this is a story which is centered around a group of kid main characters. Of course, it makes sense that they're not going to have this adult character, alongside them in this adventure. They need to have one of the other secondary kid characters. So it was 100% the right call. And once I'd, picked myself up and gone, of course, that's what needs to be done. It actually wasn't that big a deal, and absolutely was for the betterment of the story. But I would say, as someone who's an author and an illustrator, I have similar experiences with illustrating as well. And even on my most recent book, Mums and Mogs, there were drawings that I got feedback on, which I had to redraw. And I had naively gone into picture book illustrating thinking, oh, it'll be quick. It won't take long. But redrawing an illustration is about like rewriting about 5 or 6 chapters every time you have to do it. So those little changes, like, do you know what? The cat in this picture would be better in this position, or if we positioned it here. Same deal. You go, okay, this is a big change. It's going to be a lot of work, but actually it's for the betterment. And that's really what your wonderful editors and publishers are doing for you. They're making your piece of work fantastic. So what about you, Leanne?
That's really interesting that it applies to illustrations as well. I hadn't thought of that. Look, I'm in the same position as Sarah in that I am making some big changes to my work in progress. And what I noticed is that I really resisted those changes at first. Like I knew there was this thing in the book that wasn't working, and I was starting to feel really stale about the book. And then I was walking on the beach, which is where I always get my best ideas. And I suddenly had this idea about this massive change, and I resisted it like crazy because it was such a big change. The trouble was there was this enormous amount of energy in that, in the feeling of that new idea. And I think this is what everybody's saying, there's that tingle when a new idea comes in, and a big changes to a book can really revitalize a book and really kind of send you back into it with all this amazing energy. So what I'm doing at the moment, like I started at the beginning and started thinking about, okay, how does this change the beginning? And I've got to the point now where I'm having to think about the structure of the book. I'm having to think about, well, okay, the first turning point can be the same, but what about the second turning point? And what about the crisis? They are actually going to have to be really different because there are now some different characters coming in, and it's turning into a different sort of book. So it's an enormous amount of work, but I am loving it because it has taken this book that was just getting a bit stale, and I was getting a bit sick of it and secretly knew it wasn't working. And it's just kind of made it go boom, which I love. So Deb, how about you?
Leanne, I love that so much. And I think because 3 of us are in that process at the moment, I've pitched an idea to my publisher, quite an extensive idea, lots of chapters, whole synopsis, and she was very underwhelmed. And so I'm in the process now of blowing that up, keeping the stuff that I love. And then when I look back on some of my favorite novels, and actually some of kids' favorite novels of mine, they're the ones that I actually needed to mine much further to find the idea that gave me the spark and that more of the tingles that both you and Sarah are talking about. I remember with Grimsden, I was kind of fairly happy with the first draft, but my editor gave me these notes. So Walton just said more danger, and I just went, okay, I've trapped some kids in a flooded city with sea monsters and flying machines, and I remember going, okay, I'm going to add even more danger, and that kind of blew up the story even more. And even though it was just 2 edit words, it was a massive amount of work. And it's not just the work too. It's if I do this work, will it work? Will I make it worse? Like, I don't know if people who are not authors realize that, and illustrators too. Mick, you might feel like this too. will I wreck this? I know I've got a lot of painter friends and they think, oh, I really want to change this, but I'm on a canvas and I'm dealing with oils that are very expensive. Will I muck this up? So there's also that. I've thrown characters away before, and Sarah, exactly what you said, their function, they didn't earn their place in that story. And I took bits that away from them, which was the reason I thought they were so valuable, and I gave it to another character, and suddenly I didn't need them. So I think the trouble too is it also means throwing good stuff away. And you have to be brave about that. You have to go, you know what, that chapter that I wrote, and I wrote it so well, and it's one of the most lyrical, beautiful things I've ever written. Big changes also means throwing stuff that you know is good, brilliantly written chapters. So, but it's better for the story. And anything that's key. Anything that is better for the story, we need to do it. We need to honor that story.
Yeah, and I think that a very good reason not to do your fine editing too soon, because if you're going to be kicking out chunks and you've gone to your fine editing and the tinkering and the beautifying too soon, it's even more painful. It's
very
even
true.
I have thrown away thousands of finely edited words before I learnt that lesson the very hard way. Thank you, everyone. I think it's pretty clear that the word is to go big in your rewriting. Be bold, be brave, like us. We're 5 Writers, 5 Minutes. Thanks for joining us. We will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.